Here's the question that we're going to explore tonight. The first one is this. Is Soros, is it time? Is it Soros time? He's kicking his, the euro is about to collapse. Everybody freak out. He's talking about that, and he's kicking that into high gear. The EU is on the edge of collapse. I don't know if this is the Soros moment or not. The Soros think that he can now give that just a little nudge off the cliff. Remember, we tried to warn about the EU, because if the EU falls, we fall too. The second question we have tonight is why? And this one really comes from, oh, gee, Glenn, it doesn't make sense. I mean, George Soros, he's a capitalist. I mean, why would somebody want somebody's economy to collapse? Nobody wants that, because he'll lose too. No. Actually, if you're the puppet master, if you are the one who is helping orchestrate all of it, you just nudge, and you can profit a great deal. Some people do want to see economies collapse because they have a lot riding on it. People like Spooky Dude George Soros made his claim to fame in the 1990s by betting against currencies. This is how he does it. Now listen, in 1992, he bet $10 billion on the British pound collapsing. $10 billion. Perspective. The amount of that one single bet, $10 billion, is larger than at least 60 countries across the globe. When the final damage to the pound were all tallied, millions of people in Great Britain saw their entire savings account, everything they'd worked their whole life, all their retirement accounts, completely wiped out. Economies flew into turmoil from Tokyo to Rome. But everything was great for George Soros. He made that one bet, and in one night, he made $1 billion. That's $2 million every minute. The pound appreciated 15% over the next couple of weeks, and all told, Soros raked in $2 billion off the devaluation. But he warned about it. That's all he did. All I did was I saw an opportunity and said, boy, people, you should get out of that because it should be devalued. He coldly admits his actions benefited no one but himself. He was even able to laugh about it at an event with Charlie Rose. Watch.
You were the guy, they said, who broke the Bank of England.
Right, well,
and did.
Well, that's true.
Okay, but that's all he's ever cared about, George Soros. He is a godless man, and he is playing God. He has fame because of that. He had a global platform and influence, and he could feed his dangerous and self-admitted messianic fantasies about himself. Look at what George Soros says about himself. It's sort of a disease when you consider yourself some sort of God, the creator of everything. But I feel comfortable about it now since I began to live it out. Really? Now, he made $2 billion on the pound collapsing. Imagine what he could make on the collapse of the euro and then the dollar. He's got more chips to put out on the table. Soros manages about $30 billion in his quantum hedge fund. And while many have suffered since 2008, he doesn't seem to be having any problems at all. It's really quite strange. Let me ask you this. How are you doing with your money? How are you doing since the collapse of 2008? George Soros put a $1.1 billion, this is his earnings, $1.1 billion in 2008. In 2009, now remember, while you were losing money, in 2009, how much did you lose, percentage-wise? His fund grew 29%. Now, who has that kind of a year? It grew 29%. Remember, he's not making anything. He's not selling vomit bags or cars or anything else. He's betting on the markets. That guy should go to Vegas. Now, Soros gained, just in fees and investment gains, $3.3 billion. Last year, Forbes said he's one of the second largest ranking guys making money in the country. The first, I think, wasn't it, Tiffany, wasn't it Facebook? Zuckerberg? Yeah, Zuckerberg. I know what he did. He's doing Facebook. It's a phenomenon. Last year, second largest gain of richest people in America went to George Soros. Nobody has talked about this in the mainstream media. $7.8 billion last year. Wow. Net worth increased by more than, ready? $13 billion since the collapse. So while you lost money, while you're struggling, this billionaire has made $13 billion since the collapse. His net worth was, in 2007, $8.5 billion. Now, it stands today $22 billion. How does somebody in this economy make that kind of money? Well, let's play a hypothetical game. Let's say that Soros, the fund management, has roughly now 3 times the amount of money, the amount of assets that the Quantum Fund had when he managed it in 1992, and he bet $10 billion against the sterling. That means that he wouldn't have $10 billion to put in on this gamble, but he'd have $30 billion to come up and bet against the euro. Now, if this would play out anywhere like it did before, in one night, a 20% gain, he'd make $6 billion in one night. So please don't tell me that George Soros doesn't want to collapse the economy, that he has no reason. He has 6 billion reasons to do it. And he's done it 5 times before. Why is no one in the media even looking at George Soros? I'll tell you why. Because they're all scared to death of him. He controls just about everything, everywhere. You're talking about the, who is it, the Koch brothers? Koch brothers? They're school children compared to George Soros. Everyone in the press this week concerned about Romney's paltry hundreds of millions of dollars, please. Soros wipes his butt with Romney's pittance. That kind of money puts him on par, try this, with Fortune 500 companies. These Fortune 500 companies are about the size of George Soros. But you probably have never heard of these. Whirlpool, Kohl's, CBS. I didn't know they still made money, but apparently they do. The Gap. Sara Lee. We also have J.C. Penney and Halliburton. Now, all of those companies create clothing and appliances and cheesecake. So I know what they do. These guys are making refrigerators. What is it that George Soros is creating? They make refrigerators and dishwashers. George Soros makes... wait a minute. Nothing. George Soros makes bets. Wow. We have got to get this guy to Vegas. By the way, ADD moment here, all of Soros' incomes comes from capital gains. That means he's paying exactly the same tax rate as, yes, evil Mitt Romney. Call Mitt Romney's office and tell him, we don't want any of your kind around here. I guarantee you that the man who has made $17 billion in the past few years paid less in percentage than his own secretary. But is the media saying anything about that? Mitt Romney, as far as I know, doesn't make the kind of money that George Soros does, and at least he doesn't make it the way George Soros does by trying to invest in the failure of entire countries and their currency. Then grab the phone and dial up his buddies in the governments of said countries, and then call up the heads of giant global banks and then other influential economic leaders and give all of them an earful of advice on how to solve the situation. Now, I may be going out on a limb here, but that kind of sounds like a conflict of interest. It seems to be, however, a routine pattern for George Soros. For instance, let me give you a couple things. Light squared, the investment Soros invests through hedge funds millions of dollars into Light Squared. Now, Light Squared, this is a communication company. What are they trying to do? They're just trying to communicate. That's all they're trying to do. They are trying to establish another wireless broadband network. Now, here's the problem with Light Squared. An Air Force general steps to the plate. His name is William Shelton, and he says this new network, just even testing it, is going to interfere with the military GPS systems. Well, this poses a problem, doesn't it? I mean, for George Soros. But it poses a bigger problem to us, because if the general is right, then our GPS for our smart bombs and everything else might be temporarily interrupted. It might be a danger. It's a danger to our national security. So what happens? 4 George Soros-funded organizations start lobbying on behalf of Light Squared. Then the White House pressures the general into changing his prepared testimony to downplay his concerns. That doesn't sound good. Second example, Petrobras. We told you about this at Fox. The Petrobras investment. Soros invests $811 million into Petrobras. This is the government-run Brazilian oil company. Okay, what happens? Well, the Obama administration, strangely, on their own, coincidence of coincidence, decides to slap a moratorium on offshore drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. But here's the weird part. They give the green light and even issue billions in loans to Petrobras in order to do some more offshore drilling deeper than what they were doing in the Gulf. When we exposed this on Fox, Soros sold his Petrobras shares. He later brought them back and invested in the company again. Because we don't pay attention, America loses and George Soros gains. That seems to be the general pattern with George Soros. George Soros lines his pockets with billions of dollars while the working person suffers. Yet no one is even talking about him in the media. No one is even willing to call him by name. They're not even willing to call him out on extremely questionable practices of betting on currencies while trying to influence them and their policies at the same time. Let me give you another example. Do you have that story? This was just handed me right before we went on.